For this, the 11th episode of Critical Thinking in the Bible, I want to begin by reading a short passage of Scripture to see if you'll be able to identify which Scripture it is. Now, this is one of the most famous passages in all of Christianity, so it may seem it should be easy for you to recognize it, but don't be surprised if you can't, because the language I'm going to be reading it in is English, as it was spoken approximately 1,000 years ago. I'm not going to read the entire passage, simply because near the end there are some very large words I have trouble pronouncing, but from the few lines I do read, if you're going to recognize it, you probably will. So here goes. Fader ur, thu the ert on hilfonum, see thin namag hilgod, to become thin rice. Gewortha thin willa, on yorthin swaswa on hilfonum. You may have recognized that that was the beginning of the Our Father prayer. But if you didn't, don't be surprised. As we all know, languages change over time, and English, as it was spoken 1,000 years ago, is much different than the English of today. We actually understand a lot about the ways in which languages change, and the reasons for those changes. One reason we have this information is because written language has now been in existence for several thousand years, and we're able to compare very ancient manuscripts with more recent manuscripts from the same languages and see what differences there are. Also, some modern scientists have devoted their careers to comparing an individual language from generation to generation to see how it evolves. Also, there are some who compare the similarities and differences between different but related languages. Yet none of this information was available to the writers of the Bible. One of the few things they did know about language was that different languages exist. They knew they had neighbors who didn't speak Hebrew. Their languages were mutually unintelligible, and this didn't seem to make a lot of sense. So they came up with an explanation. Now, for the amount of knowledge and understanding they had at the time, their explanation seemed pretty reasonable. What they said was that at one time all humans had spoken the same language, but that they had used this mutual language to coordinate their efforts in an activity God didn't want them to do. They had tried to build a tower, the Tower of Babel. So God confused their languages, made them incapable of understanding each other, to prevent them from continuing with the tower. Thus they ascribed the existence of other non-Hebrew languages and neighboring peoples to this one event they said happened with the Tower of Babel. However, we now know that many languages currently in use, and English is one of those languages, did not exist at all when that explanation was given. Also, some languages that were in use at the time are now dead languages. And some languages that were in existence at the time and are still in use have changed drastically over the centuries between. So we know that one explanation doesn't cover any of the changes that have happened since then. However, modern linguistics does explain those changes. And in fact, modern linguistics can easily explain all of the changes that happened before that explanation was given, and can account for the differences in language in that one region around Israel. Yet there are still people today who use the Tower of Babel explanation to account for all of the different languages currently in existence. The question is, when you use your critical thinking to analyze the Tower of Babel story, does it sound to you like an actual account that explains the differences in language? Or does it sound like an explanation that was invented by men who didn't fully understand the situation?